Welcome back for another Talking Technical, and I mean the whole world, let's call it South Africa, we know definitely is in a lockdown or a shutdown situation, but the charts are carrying on and they're not stopping. And I never knew that me and Christelle is part of the front line of South Africa because the JSE is open and all our readers are contacting us for different levels. And it's quite an interesting period because we can live this passion of us. So once again, thank you. And remember, this show weekly is purely focused on community requests. So you can just send in your requests and we will see how many of the charts that we can work through. And hopefully we can introduce you to a wonderful passion of mine for many, many years. But maybe you will also find it interesting. And in this period of a lockdown or a shutdown, takes up this new hobby and change your life forever. Well, the first question this week was EOH, and that was from Stefan. Stefan, here's the chart, and I'm using a weekly chart because if I look at this chart, I can clearly see that from the left-hand top, around 131 Rand a share, to 2.90 Rand now, it is just one way to the downside. Yes, we do see a consolidation here, a tiny consolidation, but if I look at the momentum is clearly to the downside. Let's just have a look here, and you will see. From there, there you are. From there, that it is just one way to the downside. So that tells you that the momentum is clearly to the downside. But Stefan wants to know, is there a possibility of a turnaround, and can I maybe look at buying the share in some time in the future? Now let's have a look. Stefan, what I say is that while the share is on a downward trend, rather wait for a resistance line like this one to turn into a support. And where will that support be, or that resistance be? Only above 6.80 Rand. And to be honest with you, this market has been hammered to pieces. And I would rather look at something that's been hammered, and it's a quality company that's proven itself. Remember, EOH was a wonderful company, but they make some vital wrong decisions, and that is showing in this chart. And that's why I would like to say, be careful that you concentrate that the chart is maybe going to turn around. In actual fact, there's many other opportunities where you know that it can turn for the better. So EOH for me, only above that level, and unfortunately below 2.40 Rand, this chart can even go lower. So unfortunately for me, it's not a chart to look at this point in time. But also Rudy asked me about Sasol. Now Sasol, we know there's just a lot of problems here. This was first a beautiful company, as you can say, one of the old stalwarts. It was a blue chip. And I can remember many years ago, and I just want to briefly show the viewers again. I can remember many years ago on the Talking Technical show, I was just worried and I showed this chart. Let's just go to a monthly chart and we can actually see that, and then it's a clear picture. Now, at that point in time, I actually said on the show, I hope that I am completely wrong and that the chart proves me wrong and the technicals show that I'm completely wrong. So what happened? There's the left shoulder, there's the massive head, there's the right shoulder, and look at it, there was a tiny left shoulder and a head and a right shoulder also warning there. But this was the big formation that worried me. And what happened, we don't need to explain any further. There was the top of the head to the neckline. If you to project that to the downside, it actually fell well below that. Now, Sasol, we know has got their own specific problems, and there's a lot of debt there, and that the guys overspent on the Lake Charles project, and everything is in array. And the big problem is they are almost struggling to find some capital, and now we also know that the oil price is under immense pressure, so that puts the company under severe pressure just to pay all their debt. But let's have a look at the daily chart, because Rudy wanted to know, is there a possibility that the chart can turn around and that he can nibble on it? Now Rudy, this is now a daily chart. We just looked at the monthly and a weekly chart, a line chart, but this is now the daily chart. Now, if I look at this massive gap here. Now, that gap was opened when Sasol came out and said that they've overspent and that they're running into trouble and maybe they're considering what we call a rights issue. Now, if I look at this chart, it's trading at 23.22, and what do we see? For the last couple of days, almost no action. So for me, if I look at this chart, I would rather say, let's wait for a turnaround. And where will the turnaround be? Personally, if it takes out that line there. And let's have a look, where is that? That line will be, just want to combine it there. There you are. There you are. Unfortunately, Sasol will only give a buy above 49.28. Why? Because this was the previous resistance of a few days ago. It looks like it wants to give us a rounding bottom here, and we need to wait for the resistance to turn into a support. But there's something else that you need to keep in mind, Rudy. One thing that you need to keep in mind, say for instance you buy 100 shares at 23.22 and Sasol comes along with a rights issue. They will probably say to you, listen Rudy, we want you to buy another 100 or maybe 200 shares at 23 or 16 Rand or 40 Rand, whatever the price will be of that rights issue. And of course with a rights issue, usually we know that they issue a lot of shares and that is not good for investors. But technically speaking, I said to you, only above that 49 Rand level, I will look at the chart. And remember, this is, although it was a blue chip of a blue chip company, this is high risk. Because what can happen is that the oil price can maybe stay depressed for a couple of months or maybe a year. Then Sasol will not make money. And at the moment, the Rand is helping them. Remember, the Rand will not always help them. They need to pay their debt. The only little light in the dark tunnel that I can see, with all these pressures around the world of the coronavirus, maybe the people that Sasol owes some money to, they can sit around the table and say, listen guys, you need to help us. We've got a lot of problems, but we've also got a coronavirus. And of course, they were just fined by the American authorities for illegal, you can almost say, dumping of a product or environmental mess up. So what it tells you, they've got a lot of problems. But for me, I will only look at this share above that resistance because it can go under. Can you believe it? That the top company of Sasol can maybe go under in this period of times. Let's have a look at clicks. And I know that everybody is loving clicks, and I would like to show it on a weekly chart. And let's have a look here. The person that asked me about this was John. John said to me, Frans, I'm seeing this company and I think this is a wonderful company and maybe it's time to put even more money into it. Now, if I look at this chart, I can see that the company is starting to give me some lower highs. There's a high, there's a lower high. Yes, there was a spike a little bit, but then from there to there is a lower high. And if the share cannot take out 262 Rand 80, let's call it 262 Rand, if it cannot get above that and turn that into a support, I will see this as a high, a lower high, and maybe another lower high. And look at it. There's a low, a lower low, and a lower low. So that tells me that there's a little bit of a problem. And as people know, in the past, I always mentioned that you sometimes get a share that ignores the technicals and that the share just carries on rallying. And there was a few of them in the past. One was Naspers many years ago. Not that far in the distant few in the past was Capitec. And here's another one, Clicks. But what happened in the meantime, with the selling that we've seen in the market, this one conformed suddenly to a technical picture. And that was the left shoulder. And there's the head. And there's the right shoulder. And see what happened? It played out to the peak. And that tells me now, if that's the case, there you are. You can see it played out. The moment the share starts to conform to technicals, I suddenly realized that things are starting to turn for the normal in that company, and that momentum and pure buying is not just driving the share anymore, but the informed capital is starting to take over. So I'm a little bit nervous on clicks. And for me, although it is a wonderful company and nothing is wrong, and I know they're sitting on loads of cash, I just say to myself, what the market taught us over the last few years was a few things. Early signals on the technical side, you need to see it as a warning, unless it takes out this high of 262. The other thing is the market eventually, in the beginning, it ignored high price to earnings ratios. But clicks are sitting on a price to earnings ratio of 35 and a dividend yield of 1. Now I can mention just out of my head at least 20 or 30 companies on the JSE at the moment that's sitting on price to earnings ratios less than 10 and much better dividends. So what I think, and I'm not a fundamentalist, what I do think is when this low, and that low is sitting at 226.33, we can see some ugly selling in this share, and we can see maybe some top fund managers selling out of clicks and maybe start nibbling on other companies with better price to earnings ratios and maybe better dividend yield. So if we look at the share, momentum is still clearly to the upside, and we've also seen over the past that, remember, if you look at the company, we've seen over the past that the company ignores warnings in the beginning, and then suddenly things turns out to be ugly. And let's have a look. Where's the 40-week moving average? And there you are. The 40-week moving average has been tested. It's proven as a support. And for me, it's now quite simple. When I look at the chart like a clicks, and there's many charts, the moment they start to fall or they start to gain new momentum to the top, they usually give a goodbye kiss around the 40-week moving average. And while the stock is just all the way to the top, I mean, this stock didn't even see a pullback in this market sell-off that we've just experienced. This share, if it breaks below the 40-week moving average and we see a technical goodbye kiss there and a move below 222, I'll be very nervous on clicks, because although the momentum is clearly to the upside, it can suddenly disappoint and actually show you that the share can fall much further than what you can anticipate. We've seen it over the last 2 months, that shares that you thought that will never fall suddenly fall 30 or 35%, even if the management is great. It starts to happen and then it knocks them to pieces. Just after the break, we'll carry on with some other stocks.